All right, so we'll continue on with Unit 6, which will deal with stems of the plant anatomy unit. So the function of stems, number one, is movement of materials for waters and minerals from the roots to the leaves, manufactured food from the leaves down to the roots. Another function is that it's going to support the leaves and reproductive structures like flowers, and it's also a site of food storage. So some external structures, the lineales, or breathing pores, bud scale scars. These are going to show where terminal buds have been located in the past, and leaf scars are going to show where leaves were at some point attached to the stems. A terminal bud is a bud that's on the end of a stem, and an auxiliary lateral bud is a bud that's on the side of the stem. So we can see some of those different vocab terms put to use here in this diagram. So your terminal bud, of course, at the end of the stem. You can see auxiliary buds that are on the side of the stem. Leaf scar, okay, obviously there was a leaf here at some point. Bud scale scar, there's a scar here where buds once were. And then you can see breathing pores and the pith, which we'll get to here in just a little bit. So some structures within the stem are internal stem structures. So again, xylem and phloem come up. It's extremely important when we're talking about plants. So xylem is the tissue that's going to transport waters and nutrients from the roots up to the stem. Phloem is the tissue that's going to transport the food down from the leaves to the roots. Then cambium is a thin green, actively growing tissue located between the bark and the wood that are going to produce stem cells. Some more internal stem structure. So bark is old inactive phloem. Heartwood is going to be old inactive xylem. So bark is of course on the outside. Heartwood is going to be on the inside of the bark. And sapwood is going to be new active xylem. So internal stem structure in monocots, you're going to find vascular bundles that are going to contain both xylem and phloem. Some examples of monocots are grasses and corn, and these red bundles are going to be your xylem and your phloem in these bundles throughout a monocot stem. Monocot stem, the vascular bundles, you can kind of see here what it looks like really zoomed in on a vascular bundle, the xylem vessels and the phloem tissue. So the internal stem structure of dicots, so plant stems have xylem and phloem separated by the cambium. The example is going to be trees. So you see phloem on the outside, xylem on the inside, and cambium for the new stem cells in between those two. And there's some examples of some words that we've talked about by now up till now that deals with dicots. Okay, so remember bark, heartwood, sapwood. Sapwood, of course, is going to be closer to the cambium than the heartwood. If you think about the definitions of a heartwood, which is non, or I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. So heartwood is xylem tissues that are not being used anymore, where sapwood is new xylem tissues that are in use. So it would make sense that they're close to the cambium. And then, of course, your bark is your non-used phloem. Specialized types of stems, the corm is underground, solid, fleshy, scale covered. And examples are gladiolus and crocus. Then you have bulbs, which are layers of fleshy scales that overlap each other. It's an underground stem, and probably the most common example of this are onions. You have tubers, so this is a food storage area. They're short, thick, underground stems. Examples are potatoes. You have the crown, which are closely grouped stems or plantlets just above or just below the ground. An example are ferns. Then you have spurs, and these are short stems found on woody limbs adapted for increased fruit production. So some examples are apples and pears. Rhizomes are underground stems that produce roots on the lower surface and extended layers and flowers, shoots above the ground. Some examples are irises. You can see here there's also quite a bit of grasses that have this type of root system or stem system. Crabgrass pops to my mind. Stolons are stems that grow horizontally above the surface. A good example of this is strawberry plants. And last but not least are some examples of stem crops. So of course, potatoes, asparagus, any type of lumber, and then of course paper are all going to be crops or products that are produced from stems. And that is the end of 6.2. I went through it pretty quick. Feel free to go back and pause it. It's going to take us about 2 days in class to get through this presentation. So I really streamlined it here on the video. If you have questions, be sure you let me know, and be sure you complete the form that goes with this. Thank you.